Hi everyone and welcome back to a new video on realizations. This is part 2 of the VARC series where I'm sharing everything that I know about solving the VARC section. In part 1 we covered RCs. If you haven't checked that video already, please go and check it here. And in this video we'll be covering the verbal ability section. So I know so many students who put almost 100% of their time only on RCs and completely ignore the questions of verbal ability. And that is where the main difference comes between the 90 percentiler in VARC and the 99 percentiler in VARC. Because these 8 questions of verbal ability, these could be your easiest marks in this section because you don't have to read very long passages for this, just a short question and use some logic. And another good thing is that many of these questions are theta, which is type in the answer, so no negative marking. So let's say on the final exam day you're having a very bad time in the VARC section, you can still attempt these 8 VA questions, and if you know how to solve them, then that's a big bonus. So before I go on to explain the different type of verbal ability questions and how to solve them using tips and tricks, just some general information that I wanted to share. Remember that VARC, or verbal ability for that matter, is not a test of your English. It's a test of logic disguised in English. Here you are supposed to answer questions related to logical flow, argument structure, or cause and effect, contrasts, and the final conclusion that is being drawn. And that is why many times I've seen engineers performing very well here and not people who have very fluent English, because those are two very different things. Okay, so typically there are 4 kinds of verbal ability question. The first is para summary, then there is para jumbles, then there is odd one out, and finally we have para completion. Let's start with para summary. Para summary are questions where you're given a short passage and your goal is to choose the option out of the 4 or 5 which best summarizes the main idea of the passage. The goal is not to pick the most detailed option, but the option which very nicely covers the central theme as well as the author's intent and the overall message. And honestly, according to me, this could be the most scoring of all the different 4 verbal ability type of questions. Okay, so let me share a few tips here and then we can move on to a very practical example. One important point here is that for para summaries, do not go and read the options first, because then your head might get twisted, as in you don't know actually which is the one that's the correct option. So instead, first read the passage. Yes, this is different from some RC questions or some RC techniques. Please read the passage first. That is your main truth. And once you've read the passage, summarize it in your head in one sentence or maybe 5 or 6 words. What is the author really trying to say? No facts, no details, just the main idea, the core message. The next thing is to identify the tone of the author or the intent of the author. Why is he writing it? Is he trying to criticize something? Is he trying to compare 2 ideas? Or warning about consequences, limitations, or just explaining a phenomenon or historical thing? What is the main intent behind writing this and the tone? Because you may have 2 options explaining the same exact information, but the tone could be very different. And finally, the third point is to know how to eliminate options. I've covered the elimination tricks in great detail in the reading comprehension video, which was the first part of this series. Please go through it in detail. But here again, you have to be cognizant of those elimination tricks. Is this option incomplete, or is it just focusing on 1-2 lines and missing the main core of the passage? Is there any external information which was not in the passage? Are there any exaggerated claims? Is there some out of scope reference? Is it too narrow or too broad? Are we seeing any faulty comparison here? Is there a wrong cause and effect relationship being established in one of the options? These are very similar to how you eliminate options in RCs and very useful in para summaries as well. One of the favorite types of wrong options are the extremes, where the author is trying to say this may happen or something like this usually happens, and that is being exaggerated as always or completely or impossible or entirely. So always be very aware of these red flags, which are the extreme words. Now let's see a para summary example from past year CAT paper. I've taken this question from CAT 2025. slot 1 VARC, and let's see if we are able to eliminate options using all the tricks that I just discussed with you. So it's a para summary question, and the passage is: zombie cells may contribute to age-related chronic inflammation. This finding could help scientists understand more about the aging process and why the immune system becomes less effective as we get older. Zombie or senescent cells are damaged cells that can no longer divide and grow like normal cells. Scientists think that these cells could contribute to chronic health problems when they accumulate in the body. In younger people, the immune system is more effective at clearing senescent cells from the body through a process called apoptosis. But as we age, this process becomes less efficient. As a result, there is an accumulation of senescent cells in different organs of the body, either through increased production or reduced clearance by the immune system. The zombie cells continue to use energy, though they do not divide, and often secrete chemicals that cause inflammation, which, if persistent for longer periods of time, can damage healthy cells, leading to chronic disease. Okay, so now before we move to the options, like I said, just have 5 to 6 words in my head related to this passage are: with age, we see weaker apoptosis, which means accumulation of these dead cells. This accumulation causes inflammation, and then with inflammation, there is a link to chronic disease. Okay, now let's see the options. Option A: aging leads to less effective apoptosis, and therefore zombie cells start to accumulate in the body, causing inflammation, which accelerates aging and leads to chronic disease. Well, it almost captures every point that I had in my 5 to 6 word summary: aging, apoptosis, accumulation, disease. The only thing is that it says accelerates aging. Not sure about that, but let's see the other options. Option B: a younger person's immune system is healthy and is able to clear the damaged cells, but as people age, the zombie cells resist apoptosis and start accumulating in the body. I think this is a wrong cause and effect type of problem. The passage says that this accumulation of zombie cells happens either through increased production or reduced clearance by the immune system, and it could be both, not that zombie cells themselves are resisting. So this option also feels a little narrow because it's not covering inflammation anywhere, it's not covering aging anywhere or diseases anywhere. Option C: senescent zombie cells are inactive or malfunctioning cells that can be found throughout the body. Now, a lot of the words that are used in this option are very close to what was there in the passage: senescent cells, zombie cells, but it's just defining what a zombie cell is. It's nowhere summarizing the passage. Therefore, it's also too narrow and hence cannot be the right option. And then there is option D: dead cells accelerate chronic inflammation, weakening the immune system and lead to aging. Again, it's a wrong cause and effect. The passage says that aging weakens the immune system and the clearance, leading to zombie cell accumulation. But the option says that inflammation weakens immunity, causing aging. So very clear wrong cause and effect. Plus a very clear distortion. Nowhere we are talking about dead cells in the passage. We are talking about zombie cells that cannot divide. Very clearly the answer is option A, which kind of summarizes all the main ideas that were in the passage. So the next type of verbal ability questions are para-jumbles. In para-jumbles, you're given a set of 4 to 5 sentences and you're asked to arrange them in the correct logical coherent order so that it makes a full passage which makes sense. And this is a very clear test of logical flow or sequencing of ideas, what comes after what, sometimes even chronology or structuring of a paragraph. What should be the flow of ideas be to make sense to the reader? So 2 things. One, good that it's a TETA question, so no negative marking. But second, this is the most scary part of verbal ability. Like, I've heard most people complain that they never are able to get the order correct. But fear not, there are ways by which you can increase your accuracy in para-jumbles. Let's go through them. The biggest trick here is that you do not have to try to arrange the whole passage all at once. There are steps to do it. First, your best attempt could be to find the opening sentence, to find the first sentence instead of just trying to make order right at the beginning. Now, how to find the opening sentence? It has to be an idea which is like being introduced for the first time. Something is being introduced here, a person or some phenomenon. And this idea seems to be broad. And very clearly, this first opening line will not have words like he, she, they, them, however, consequently, because these words need a line before that for us to make sense. The next trick is to find a sure short pair, which means what are the two sentences which will definitely come adjacent to each other. And for this, you can look at pronouns. So there was an introduction of an idea in the first sentence, and in the second sentence, it's he, them, they. So that could be a sure short pair. Or something where there is a continuation word, therefore, or there is an example, like there's an idea first and then an example, or there is very clear chronology, 1901, 1902, something like this. Now, once you have an idea of the opening sentence and one or two sure short pairs, then the goal is to build a small block or just to connect the order of these ideas. And finally, try to find out the last sentence, the closing sentence of the passage. This is something where you're seeing a conclusion or something which gives future implications. Okay, we talked about this and this is how this could affect the future. Or just summarizing the whole passage in a sentence. And even though I gave you all these tips, I understand that yes, this is a type of question that could get difficult. So my tip for the final day is that even though, let's say, you have been able to maybe find one thing or two things, or let's say your brain is just not working, then just go type in something and move on. Do not spend like a very long period of time on a parajumble if it's not clicking. Okay, now let's look at it with an example. So this is from, again, CAT 2025, slot 1 VARC. We have 4 sentences, and again, we have to come up with the right order. And let's start with finding which sentence could be the opening sentence. So I'm not reading all the 4 sentences, so let's go one by one. But man, woman or otherwise, there is no denying that the quality of our life and character will be significantly shaped by the way we handle our anger. But is a continuation word. Very unlikely that this would be the opening sentence. Next sentence. Option 2. Once the taboos have been broken, women usually experience letting their fists fly as intensely liberating. Again, we have no idea what taboos are being talked about, and it does not feel like it could be a very starting broad idea. Option 3. Though this might seem a stereotype, women, unlike men, who are frequently applauded for unbridled aggression, are often socialized to keep the lid on their ire, which is a lid on their anger. Okay, this could be the first option because we have like a topic, a stereotype is the topic which is stereotypes related to women is getting introduced. Okay, let's see, come to option 4. If option 4 doesn't feel like an opening sentence, then 3 could definitely be the opening sentence. Many of them are so at odds with their aggressive feelings that as a coach, I often have to stop them from pulling their punches and encourage them to extend their arms so their blows might actually reach their fleshy target. Many of them. Now, what them? I have no idea what is being talked about here. So the pronoun here, like I said, he, she, they, very rarely the opening sentence. So this means that option 3 is our opening sentence. Now let's see if we can find any pair, any short pair. So what I feel is that sentence 4 goes on to explain women and their pent-up anger. And 3 was initially talking about something with unbridled aggression. So let's try to read 3 and 4 together if this is making sense. Though this might seem a stereotype, women, unlike men, who are frequently applauded for unbridled aggression, are often socialized to keep a lid on their ire. Many of them are so at odds with their aggressive feelings that as a coach, I often have to stop them from pulling their punches and encourage them to extend their arms. Okay. Yeah, could be. Like, it's making sense. Okay, you can see some logic here. Sentence 4 goes on to further explain that, okay, women and their pent-up anger and how they are being, like, the author has to push them to actually punch. So 3 and 4 could be a pair. Now let's try to find the closing sentence. Among the remaining options 1 and 2, we can see that option 1 has more signs of being the closing sentence. But man, woman or otherwise, there is no denying that the quality of our life and character will be significantly shaped by the way we handle our anger. Okay, it's like a broad sentence, a conclusion or something of an advice. So yeah, 3, 4, 2, 1, because 1 is closing and 3, 4 is the first pair. So the correct option is 3, 4, 2, 1. And it's also making sense if you read it in that order. That's the last check that you have to do once you've used these tips and tricks. The next type of verbal ability question is odd one out. And this is a little similar to parajumbles because this is parajumbles in reverse. Here you have 5 sentences and the 4 of them will make a logical, coherent sense, but one of them is disturbing the order. So if you know how to do parajumbles and you have those ideas in your head, you can also try to apply them to find out the 4 sentences, the order, and the one that is being left out will be the odd one out. Now, a point here that you don't necessarily have to come up with the correct order, but just keep those rules in mind because then you'll be wasting time if you're just trying to come up with the correct order. But keep it at the back of your mind. Here again, try to find the opening sentence, if there are any sure short pairs which are in continuation, and a concluding line. And the sentence that is just refusing to fit anywhere will be your correct option. So let's see an example. This is from CAT 2024 slot 2. We have 5 sentences here and we have to find the odd one out. Now let's try to find the opening sentence just like in parajumbles. And the goal is to find the sentence that explains an idea broadly. A sentence 1. No known researcher of human behavior would say that gender is all nature or all nurture. It is a debate or an opening line and broad. Could be an opening sentence. Let's see option 2. The evidence for a biological basis of gender certainly does not mean we should be complacent in the face of sexism. Does not feel like a starting sentence. Many people are uncomfortable with the idea that gender is not purely a social construct. Could be, could not be, mixed feelings. Despite this empirical truth, which empirical truth? Definitely not an opening sentence. There's a political preference for gender to be only a reflection of social factors and so entirely malleable. Could be, but no. But to me, sentence 1 feels like the strongest opponent for the opening sentence. Okay, let's see if we can find any sure short pairs. Okay, so there are 2 sentences which touch political something. So I'll just try to see if 4 and 5, either in the order 4-5 or in the order 5-4, makes any coherent pair. Despite this empirical truth, researchers who study the biological basis of gender often face political pushback. There's a political preference for gender to be only a reflection of social factors and so entirely malleable. Not sure of the correct order, but feels like 4 and 5 is a sure short pair. So we have an opening line and some sense of a pair. Now, if I look at it again, I think the order will be 4 and 5 because first we get to know about political pushback and then line 5 explains the political pushback. Why there is a pushback? Because there is a preference for it to be only based on social factors and therefore entirely malleable. And if it's something else, then there is a pushback. So 4 and 5 could be a strong block. Now let's look at option 3. Many people are uncomfortable with the idea that gender is not purely a social construct. So this is somewhat related to the pushback and the preference for everything being socially explainable. The rough order in my mind is 1, 4, 5, 3 and option 2, which talks about evidence for a biological basis for gender certainly doesn't mean we should be complacent in the face of sexism. So nowhere in any other option we have anything like sexism or moral or social implications. The whole passage, like every line other than this, talks about gender debates or biological basis, political pushback against researchers, and therefore this is a theme only is different. So the correct option is option 2. The next type of verbal ability questions is para completion. Here you have one line and you have to find where that line fits in a passage, where this line can be included as a bridge. So here the trick is to find where that slot, where the sentence before it and after it, once the 3 are read together, makes sense. And this can be done through understanding the tone, where is the tone is consistent, or of course logical progression of the passage, sometimes even chronology and sometimes even using pronouns. Okay, so if the first line had a proper noun and then there is he, she, it, them, then that could be a logical order. Let's see an example. This is from CAT 2024 slot 2 VARC. So here's the sentence that we need to fit somewhere. Yet each day the flock produced eggs with calcareous shells, though they apparently had not ingested any calcium from land which was entirely lacking in limestone. Now let's see where in this passage this line fits. So this line is about the flock producing eggs with calcium even though they have not ingested any calcium. Okay. Early in this century, a young Breton schoolboy who, preparing himself for a scientific career, began to notice a strange fact about hens in his father's poultry yard. As they scratched the soil, they constantly seemed to be pecking at pecks of mica, a siliceous material dotting the ground. Till now, there has been no introduction of eggs or calciums or any kind of difference. Okay, this is what they are ingesting and this is what they are producing. No one could explain to Louis Kervran why the chickens selected the mica, or why each time a bird was killed for the family cooking pot, no trace of mica could be found in its gizzard. So here we have no one could explain. Let me read that that option, the correct the sentence that we have to add. Yet each day the flock produced eggs with calcareous shells, and then it goes on to say, yet it took Kervran many years to establish that the chickens were transmuting one element into another. Yet each day the flock produced eggs does not fit at 4 also. So most likely it is option 3. Because line 1 and 2 are very tightly linked. We have a boy who's being introduced, and then the hens being talked about, that okay, they scratch the soil. And in blank 4, it follows a sentence which draws like a scientific conclusion based on the observation. So like immediately after the conclusion, we can't have an example which starts with yet each day. So yeah, the correct option is blank number 3, which is option A. Okay, so I'm done with all the 4 kinds of verbal ability questions. And if there's anything that I want to tell you for the verbal ability section, is that please maintain an error book, because every time you make a mistake, there is no way to go back and refer to it or remember it unless you have it noted down. So once you get something wrong, why was it that you got it wrong? Did you miss some contrasting word, or you missed the fact that there was a pronoun after it, so that could not be the first sentence or something like that. Just maintain a formula book, because over time, once you keep noting down the mistakes that you're making, you will start to see patterns, the kind of mistakes that you're repeatedly doing. And that practically is gold for you. So again, I'll want to repeat that verbal ability is not a test of your English. It is again a test of logic, of coherence, of how you're able to come up with a structure that makes sense. And the best part is it can be learned by practice. That's all I had for you in this video. I hope you found this helpful. Please make sure to have a look at part 1 of this VRC video series, where I cover reading comprehensions and how to eliminate options. And then there's also part 3 coming, where I'll be covering all the free resources for VRC, both how to learn the concepts, how to revise, how to practice, as well as some free resources for sectional mocks. Till then, bye-bye and all the very best.